To our Career Coach webinar, Jumping Ship, How to Transition into Supply Chain from a Different Area. My name is Dana Day, and I'm the Manager of Member Relations at APICS. Before we begin, I'd like to run through a few details. This presentation is being recorded and will be available at apics.org/careercoach. At the end of the presentation, we will have time for a question and answer session. If you look to the toolbar on your screen, you'll see a questions box. To ask your question at any time during the presentation, simply type it in the box and click send. And now it's my pleasure to introduce our speaker, Rodney Apple. Rodney is the founder and president of SCM Talent Group, LLC, a national supply chain recruiting and executive search firm that recruits across the end-to-end supply chain discipline. Rodney has been working in professional recruiting for many years and has a wealth of knowledge and experiences that he generously shares as our own APICS Career Coach. Everybody, please give a warm welcome to Rodney Apple. Rodney, you may begin.
Thank you very much, Dana. And I'd like to thank each of you for joining our webinar today on Jumping Ship, how to transition into supply chain from a different area. And really what this essentially means is, and I get this question all the time from candidates that are either looking to move into a supply chain career, perhaps they're in an industry that's not doing so well, or in a job function that they're not happy with. And so we get that question very often. And then we also get questions from folks that are in an area of supply chain, let's say, for example, working in a plant, and they're looking to move into a corporate environment, and they're having difficulty moving from plant to corporate. So we have some good material here that we'll cover to give you some strategies and tactics for making these career transitions. So the agenda today, we're going to do a quick introduction, cover a quick tutorial on how to discover past career coach webinars and white papers. Talk about reasons that that individuals want to make a career change. We'll talk about how to go about determining the type of work, the type of jobs, the type of culture that will best suit you, and how to pursue that. We'll do a quick breakdown of supply chain career paths. We've done a webinar on this topic recently. And then we'll get into career changing tactics, whether you're internally and want to make an internal move into supply chain or into a different area of supply chain, as well as external career change tactics, meaning you'd like to move into a supply chain career without having any prior experience. And then we'll wrap up with Q&A. So just a quick overview of my background. I've been recruiting for a little over 20 years. Lead SCM Talent Group. Again, we're a national supply chain recruiting and executive search firm. We recruit across the end-to-end supply chain. So we handle everything from sourcing, procurement, logistics, all aspects of planning, from demand planning to supply planning, production planning. We do a lot in manufacturing. We do a lot in quality assurance, as well as continuous improvement, Lean Six Sigma, and so forth. We do both retained executive search, contingency search, as well as contract staffing. And we mainly work with manufacturers, retailers, wholesale distributors, as well as e-commerce companies. And we do a little bit on the service provider side with 3PLs, but not a whole lot. We mainly focus on the manufacturing retail side. Spent half my time in corporate recruiting for a handful of large corporations. Built the very first supply chain department for the Home Depot back in the early 2000s. Went on over to Coca-Cola at their headquarters and led all of their manufacturing recruitment and all aspects of supply chain as well. Did the same for Cummins, Kimberly-Clark, and some other organizations as well. Gives me a pretty unique perspective, having been on the inside of some large companies with very large and dynamic supply chains. I've filled over 1,000 different professional to executive level positions within those corporations. And so I've seen a lot, and I'm happy to share my advice from a career development perspective. If we're not connected yet, I would encourage you to send me an invite on LinkedIn. There's my email address right there if you'd like to reach out. And we also put out a lot of content on Twitter as well. There's our Twitter handle at SCM Talent. If you'd like to access some of our past material, going on to year 4 of serving as the APICS Career Coach. We have covered a lot of material, every aspect of career development, from resume advice to accelerating your career in supply chain, evaluating, negotiating a job offer, master the art of interviewing, and so forth. So we got some great content. All you need to do is log into APICS and go to apics.org/career coach. And if you're logged in, you'll be able to replay past webinars and download our white papers as well. We've also putting out similar content in the APICS magazine. So going into year 2, serving as the department author for professional development, you can access all of those past articles. If you just simply go to the Google APICS magazine, it'll take you right there, and then you can search some past articles. Here's some of the articles that we've covered in the past year or so. Again, resume advice, interviewing advice, and so forth. All right, so we'll get started with material. There's a lot of different scenarios that come into play when you're looking to make a career change. You get quite a bit of inquiries from folks that are transitioning out of the military, that are working in logistics or some kind of an operations capacity. And while the work is similar, the lingo is very different, and so it can be a bit of a challenge when transitioning out of the military, just to understand what the careers look like in the private sector. So we'll kind of talk about some tactics for, accelerating that transition into the private sector from the military. Perhaps you're working internally within a non-supply chain and related function like finance, and your desire is to move into supply chain. We'll talk about some tactics for that type of move. Let's say you're in supply chain or in manufacturing or operations, and you're looking to make a move, perhaps from your logistics to procurement, for example. And then we'll talk about some external moves. I get this quite a bit: consultants being on the road, start having children, ready to get off the road. I want to move into an industry position. So how to make those kind of moves, as well as moving from one industry to another. First and foremost, before you get active into a job search, I think it's always wise to self-reflect and spend some time evaluating, why do you want to make a move? What kind of work am I really good at? What type of culture aligns best and makes you the most productive? But also, understand what is not a fit, so you can try to avoid those types of opportunities, those types of jobs, and those types of companies. Some questions to get started. Obviously, I always suggesting this being out of shaper, and just kind of jot down, what am I really good at? What are my key strengths? And what am I not so good at? What are some of my weaknesses? So you want to really understand that, and then do some research online as well. We've seen the news recently with Toys R Us shutting down. Retail's taking a hit, but there are some areas of retail that are doing very well. We've got some retail clients that are growing tremendously, and so you want to be able to do the research, figure out what industries are thriving, what companies within those industries you're targeting are doing well versus on the decline. Because the worst thing you can do is get into a company or an industry that is just, the focus is nothing but cost cutting, and they go through reorgs every other year. Just not a great place to be from a career development and advancement perspective. What areas of supply chain are experiencing growth right now? Are there any particular positions that are on the decline? As we've seen in recent past, a lot of companies have outsourced manufacturing overseas. That seems to be reversing in terms of the trend, but we still have a global economy, so you need to evaluate that. I mean, some areas of manufacturing in the U.S. are doing fantastic right now. Others are not doing that great. So definitely spend the time researching the different areas of supply chain as well as industries, so you can make a wise decision. You also want to think about company size, as well as the ownership type. There's private equity, venture capital owned companies that can be a bit of a higher risk, but also a higher reward, so you want to evaluate that. Smaller companies, you tend to wear more hats and get more exposure, whereas larger companies, tend to have a wealth of training, development, and a plethora of opportunities that you can explore as well. That you'll find more than you would within a small company. So absolutely spend the time to self-reflect and do some research before you conduct a job search. So when you look at making a move into supply chain, you also want to understand what are some of the hottest skill sets that are out there today. There's a good chance, whether you're in supply chain or not, let's just say you're not in supply chain, that you're going to have some skills that are very transferable into many different supply chain roles. So what do some of those skills look like? Data analysis, big data has been a very hot area over the last few years. There's an enormous amount of data that transfers upstream and downstream through the supply chain, from your suppliers and their suppliers all the way through to the end customer. And there's a lot of positions within supply chain, I would say across the whole end-to-end supply chain, where data analytics is very important. Leveraging data, the speed of data to aid with making good decisions. Procurement, logistics, planning, all of these types of roles, manufacturing, sales and operations planning, all of these types of roles rely on good data. Supply chain systems, technology is rapidly advancing. We just took on a new search yesterday with Internet of Things company, very slick technology, hardware, software as a service type model, and they have all types of asset tracking devices that they put on devices, from low cost technology to, if you want to track something that's more expensive, like for example, you've got some kind of a piece of construction equipment, and then all of this is on a GPS basis, Bluetooth enabled, Wi-Fi. It's really slick technology. So keeping up with the technology is important. I know when we take on new assignments these days, there's always some type of system that the client is looking for experience with. As far as the acronyms go here, you're probably familiar with this if you're in supply chain: WMS, warehouse management systems, manufacturing execution systems, transportation management systems, yard management systems, material resource and planning systems, and so forth. And everything tends to sit on a backbone. Your ERP systems, the most common or most popular, or let's say the largest, are SAP, Oracle, and JDA. So having a good ability to work with systems is important in supply chain, especially as technology continues to rapidly evolve. Project management is another skill set that is important, and these are very, very transferable. We see a lot of project management roles in many positions. Typically, you're doing your day-to-day job, and you also have a project that you're either leading or you're a member of. That's very, very common. So you want to hone in on your project management skills as well. Process improvement that is your day-to-day job. In supply chain management, you're always looking for find better ways, cheaper ways, better alternatives. So having that mindset, developing that mindset, but also learning some of the common tools and methodologies that can help enable your ability to continuously improve processes is very important. And you can learn these. There's plenty of online courses, certifications. You can get certified in Lean, Six Sigma, from a yellow belt to a green belt, black belt, master black belt. This is a very hot area that touches a lot of supply chain functions, operations, from manufacturing to distribution and warehousing and so forth. So this could be a good transferable skill set that you can use to kind of market yourself into supply chain roles. And then, it's important to have good functional technical skills, but it's equally as important to have strong soft skills, from a leadership, communication, collaboration, being able to proactively reach out to people, being able to lead people through change, get them on the same bus, work with suppliers, make sure they're fulfilling their service level agreements. It requires communications. There are not too many jobs these days where you can just sit behind a computer without talking to people. So very, very important to develop and hone in on your your soft skills as well. As I mentioned earlier, we've done a webinar on this topic, kind of breaking down the career paths that exist within supply chain management. I like to look at things from, an industry perspective. Supply chain tends to touch all types of industries, from CPG to retail, wholesale distribution, aerospace, and so forth. So those are companies that tend to make or sell things. Then you've got a whole slew of companies that you can explore on the service provider side. There's third-party logistics companies, contract warehousing companies, all types of transportation carriers across many modes that include, ocean, rail, intermodal. There's air freight, and obviously 18-wheelers running down the street 24/7. So plenty of careers in the service provider side. There's consulting, many different consulting companies. You've got your big four, your Deloitte, KPMG, PricewaterhouseCoopers, and so forth. And there are a ton of consulting companies out there that you can explore as well. Boutique, niche consulting companies. Chanalytics is one that does a lot of work in the, well, they've kind of broadened into end-to-end supply chain. That's definitely one company that's been growing, but plenty of smaller consulting companies. St. Onge does a lot with supply chain network optimization and modeling, and I know those companies have been growing as supply chains become more complex and more technology driven. You've got, speaking of technology companies, there's plenty of software and hardware providers out there, and we've kind of touched on that. You can take the association route. I've helped APICS with a couple of searches in the past, and we've got plenty of associations you can tap into, and then extending from there, you've got, when I started in supply chain recruiting, going back about almost 20 years ago, there were really just a handful of universities offering up supply chain type degrees. Now there are dozens and dozens of universities that are getting on the bandwagon because supply chain has become such a hot area from a career perspective. So there's lots of opportunities there, obviously on the recruiting side, and I could probably go on and on, but you get the point. There's plenty of opportunities on the service provider side as well. And then supply chain, really I like to think of it as an umbrella that connects a lot of different functions together and integrates those functions. Everything from your transportation warehousing, your sourcing procurement, demand supply planning, manufacturing is there's supply chain inside of manufacturing. That's called materials management, and so on. I won't not going to go into fine detail, but just wanted to make the point that there are what seems to be endless career options when it comes to the field of supply chain management. There's also, and this is another area where you can kind of segue your career into supply chain if you're working outside of supply chain. So we've talked about service providers. There are sales and marketing roles, business development roles within all of those service providers. They've got to go out and find business, calling on companies that manufacture retail. We do that ourselves here. We're always looking for new clients to work with. You've got there's customer service roles in supply chain, and those can range from order fulfillment, taking orders, processing orders, to helping customers troubleshoot, to customer-facing roles. If you're in a consumer products company, you're probably going to be selling into a Walmart or some other large retailer, and there's a lot of positions where in supply chains where they'll just dedicate individuals to focus on the largest accounts where they're getting the most revenue. And oftentimes, for example, in Walmart, headquartered in Bentonville, Arkansas, you'll go down there. It's not just Walmart. You'll find a ton of their suppliers that have offices right there in Bentonville, so they're close to the corporate office. Obviously, we talked about careers in human resources and recruiting that support the various areas of supply chain. There's typically HR partners that exist in manufacturing facilities, distribution facilities, and so forth. Finance and accounting, there's always dedicated resources within the supply chain function that handle the flow of money, from suppliers and invoicing and things like that. Information technology, You'll find dedicated IT departments for supply chain systems in most mid-sized to large companies. There's folks that support the health, safety, environmental areas within supply chain, and especially within manufacturing and distribution. We've talked about continuous improvement, process improvement as well. So a lot of different business support functions, and there are plenty of careers on that side of the fence as well. And then again, thinking about companies, you've got large public corporations, privately held companies like ours. You've got nonprofits out there. I think APICS would fall under that category. And then you've got private equity, venture capital companies that are looking to invest, that are, and to improve companies, improve their bottom lines, improve their EBITDA, and then eventually sell those for profit. You always factor those kind of scenarios. Again, startups, we're working with a startup on the Internet of Things that we just took on a supply chain manager search, and they range from small to to the Amazons and Walmarts and very large corporations of the world. And then you've got companies that focus domestically as well as globally. So those are things that you want to keep in mind when you're evaluating a career in supply chain. Know that it's just, you don't have to go work in one of the common areas. You can easily tie yourself to a supporting function as well and still be involved day to day with supply chain management. So now we've talked about doing some self-reflection and doing research to really figure out what kind of work you want to do, what kind of environment you want to work in, and then we've talked about the various career paths. It's extremely diverse. So conducting the research is very important. Let's say we've done that. You've targeted a few areas that you'd like to work in. I think I've shown this slide in many of the past webinars, but it's always important to write down your career goals. Make sure you've got SMART career goals. They're specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and timely. And write these down. You can't, if you don't write them down, it's just a dream. And make sure you keep your goals in very visible places, such as your desk, on your refrigerator, your bathroom mirror, etc. And then you're going to develop action plans, map those into your daily, time management system. If you use Outlook or a to-do list, I use both. Make sure you keep those out visible. So every day you're working on making those steps to achieve your goals. That applies to everything in life, not just your career, but your family and your personal life and so forth. So very, very important to do this, especially when you're mapping out a new career. You can't just take a haphazard approach. I'm just going to start applying to jobs. You have to have a master plan and stick with it, and make sure you're constantly reviewing your goals, making sure you're staying on track. Adjust your priorities when you're falling behind, and then celebrate when you do hit your goal. So that's the way to do it. So we're kind of going to talk. We split this into what to do if you're on the inside of a company. Let's say you're not in supply chain, or you're in one area and you want to move to another. What are some things you can do? So to get started, you always want to maintain an updated resume. And even if it's not, a perfect resume, at least have a file somewhere where you're tracking your accomplishments. Let's say your projects you've led, the big successes in your career. You want to make sure you are documenting those, because as the further you get in your career, memories can start to fade. I know mine is starting to fade. This is just a thing you want to do to keep up with your career accomplishments, because at some point in time, whether you're planning to make a move or whether your company, something happens, they sell, they shut down, you never know in today's business climate. You always want to be prepared. So that's the whole point. So get your resume fully optimized. I think it's important, even if you're just miserable in your current positions, you like the company, you can't stand your job, you can't stand your boss, whatever the case may be, you still want to try to show up with a positive attitude, maintain strong relationships, because oftentimes your boss or other leaders within the organization, they hold the keys to making those internal moves. And if you go above and beyond, if you're perceived as a strong talent within the company, that's going to improve your odds of success. So even if you're not happy, you're not in supply chain, you want to be there, it's taken a long time to get there, do whatever you can do to make a strong showing in your current position. the very best way, I think, especially when you're trying to move from one area to another internally, it's all, you hear networking is important. Well, internal networking is extremely important. Let's say, for example, you're in finance, you want to work in supply chain finance. Maybe you support marketing or something else. Of course, you can apply to internal positions. I mean, most companies allow you to do that. But I will tell you that the ones that the hiring managers are familiar with, have familiarity, they may get a first shot. So it's really important to proactively reach out to members of the target organization, whether it's a plant, whether it's a distribution center, whether it's a different department. Try to reach out and establish relationships and contact. It doesn't have to be with the hiring manager. It can be with those that are doing the same type of work or the same type of job that you would like to do. And it can be as simple as making a phone call, setting up time for a coffee, in the cafeteria or off-site, and just say, hey, I'd like to pick your brain. I'd love to learn more about the work you do. I'm highly interested in making a move at some point into your department or into that same type of job, and that can help facilitate some introductions. And when they do have that next opening, you're in a good spot. And plus, you can find out what kind of skills, what kind of experience is really needed to move into that type of role, and that can give you some good ideas for what you might need to go do on the interim to help develop yourself to where you might qualify for a role in your targeted department. And segueing into skills and learning, you should always be looking at ways to improve your skill set and improve, to make yourself more marketable for those types of opportunities. Most mid-sized large companies are going to have internal, learning or training opportunities that exist, whether it's computer-based training or online training or whatnot, as well as classroom training. So you want to definitely tap in. If we go back to some of those transferable skills, data analysis, there's going to be courses, whether they exist at your employer or outside, that you can tap into, again, to improve some of those common skill sets that are sought after within many supply chain jobs. Be sure to raise your hand and volunteer when a project comes up, especially when it's within another department, or maybe it's a cross-functional project that taps into one of the departments or facilities that you'd like to work in. Talk to your boss, talk to your leader. Say, hey, I'm looking to eventually move into this department over here. Would love your help with, signing me up for projects that can help me gain some relevant experience and make me more marketable to move into that type of role. Plenty of online courses. I know some prestigious universities like Harvard, MIT, and many others are offering free online courses. So take advantage of those and see if you can find some online courses as it relates to supply chain management. And obviously, you're a member of APICS already if you're on the call, and so look into these certifications. If you want to work in logistics, transportation, warehousing, you may want to take a look at that CLTD. If you're wanting to work in inventory management and planning, that CPIM might be a good call. And then you've got a broader supply chain role. The CSEMP would be a good choice. So you want to take advantage of those certification programs as well. And also just remember, don't, to make a move and think you're going to get some kind of promotion when you're moving into supply chain, the odds of that happening are slim to nil. Making a lateral move is very feasible. And then just sometimes, it might be a small step backwards. You may have to go down a job level. But if that's where your heart is, in that certain department that you're targeting, if there's an opening that's a level below, just be open-minded and be willing to take a small step back if that helps to get your foot inside of the door. Going back to adding value to your current employer, I know when I was in corporate America and recruiting and supply chain, we always took a look at, we always had applicants from other departments. And so, we would take a look at those. Obviously, if they fit the criteria, we're typically going to take a look, but but let's say that somebody didn't have any supply chain experience whatsoever. At the end of the day, if you're in your current employer, you want to stay with that company, you want to move into supply chain, you have to be a top performer. So always go above and beyond what is asked of you. Again, very important to track your career accomplishments, be able to quantify your results. What kind of value have you delivered for your employer? It doesn't have to be just your current employer, but even prior companies you've worked for as well. You've got to be able to showcase the value and be able to market those transferable skill sets as well. Again, volunteer for projects, seek out opportunities to help others. We want to maintain that positive attitude, and again, focus on always learning something new every day. And again, understanding what kind of skills requirements are needed in the type of role that you're pursuing, that can give you, a great guide for the types of learning and training that you might want to partake in to make you more marketable. Lastly, a great tactic, I'll say last but not least, if you're wanting to move into supply chain, would be to try to identify someone that could serve as a mentor from that department. So the benefits that, obviously the big one is getting access to someone in the department that can really give you the ammunition you need to help facilitate a move into that department. What are some of the things that you have to learn? What are some of the skills that you must have? Who are the right people, the key decision makers that you need to meet and try to gain some visibility within that company or department? How to navigate through the company, when it comes to politics and things like that. What are some common hurdles that you can avoid? What kind of skills you need to hone in on? We've kind of talked about that. And it could just give you, mentors can give you exposure to new ways of thinking as well. So these are just some of the benefits. Again, we've done at the bottom here, we've done a webinar in the past on mentorship. So if that's something that you're not familiar with and you'd like to learn more about, I would highly encourage you to review that material. But seeking out a mentor within supply chain, that person can help unlock some doors and facilitate introduction. So bear that in mind. Another thing you might want to do when you're looking for potential mentor candidates, before you start that process, of course, as with anything, lay out your objectives, your goals. What are you really hoping to achieve out of that relationship? And then you want to start identifying, let's say you've got somebody that's sitting in that position that you'd like to work in. Let's call it a transportation manager. So you want to start identifying people that have already been in that type of role. That individual could serve as a mentor. Again, does it need to be an executive person? It can be someone that's at a peer level. It could be someone that's one level up from you. The point is, establish relationships, see if that individual will be willing, to serve as a mentor, and that again can help, unlock some of the secrets, some of the things you really need to know, and some of the skills you need to gain before you make that type of career move. If your employer has a formal mentorship program, then you absolutely want to tap into that. They'll have a means for matching mentees and mentors. And then just leveraging your overall internal network is a great way to get referrals for potential mentor candidates. And then on a side note, obviously APICS has a mentorship program as well. If you're looking to gain more experience in supply chain, pretty much anyone that belongs to APICS and is set up in the mentorship program as a mentor, obviously that could be good folks to have just from an outside perspective to help you learn the ropes when it comes to supply chain management, and again, what kind of skills and experience you need to pick up on to make yourself more marketable. And then when you do set up a mentor, again, we'll have a lot of tips for how to work with a mentor in the past white paper. But you want to be courteous. You want to have a good framework developed for how you conduct your meetings, arrive with agenda, And when you leave that meeting, you're going to have some follow-ups and things to do. You want to make sure that you execute and that you're always following up, and that way you keep a positive mentorship relationship. So those are some things you can do from an internal perspective. But I will tell you that you can have the best plan in the world. You can execute on all of these tactics and actions. But at the end of the day, there's a lot of companies out there. You may not make that move successful into supply chain. And so if you can't do it internally, you need to always have a plan B, and that's what we'll get into in the next section. But a plan B is going to basically entail making a move away from your employer. If your heart is truly in supply chain management, that's where you want to work, follow all of these steps. But at the same time, you need to have a plan in place for what happens if I can't get to my destination by a certain deadline. It goes back to your goal planning. I'll reflect back to when I was at Home Depot. I started as a contractor. They wanted to convert me to permanent status, and I said, sure, I'd love to go permanent. They were Fortune 13, growing at 30%. It was a really fun place to work. And at the 11th hour, someone, high up in the HR department said, hey, we can't bring you in at this level that I was promised to come in at, and they dropped me down a level. And I said, okay, I'm gonna give this a shot. I'm going to give it 365 days. And I remember telling my boss, the director of HR, that, hey, I'm going to take this step back, but if you guys can't make this right within, 1 year, I'm going to do everything you ask of me. I'm going to go above and beyond. I did all of those things. I excelled in my role, and then a year came around, and I positioned myself to get that promotion that I should have gotten. When I came in, it didn't happen, and then I immediately made a move over to Coca-Cola. So you have to have that plan B, and use that as a last resort option. If your heart really wants to stay in with that company, that's great. But if they can't get you to that final destination, then sometimes you have to have a plan B. So external career change tactics. Again, this is where it can be a little bit more difficult if you're moving from a non-supply chain role into a supply chain role. How do you do that? So the big thing is to showcase your transferable skills. We've talked about, if you're in finance, there's a lot of areas you can go into, with procurement, sourcing procurement being one, continuous improvement being another. You may go support finance for the supply chain organization. So again, documenting your experience, skills, and accomplishments as it relates to finance, improving the bottom line and things like that. That's a transferable skill. We've talked about the importance of systems. You may not have supply chain systems experience, but there are a lot of tools that are used, with Excel probably being number one to help sift data. You've got Access, you've got a lot of business intelligence tools. You've got tools that are very popular today, like Tableau, SQL, being able to communicate with different databases and things like that. So if you've got some good system savvy, that's definitely a transferable skill. Data analytics, again, ability to use data to drive better decision making. You've got project management. We've talked about that. So being able to showcase some of those transferable skills is very important. Leadership, if you're moving into a role, we've actually been recruiting for some e-commerce facilities. These locations are sometimes in not very popular places. One in Albany, Georgia. I don't mean popular, but let's just say populated. There's not a lot of talent, and so these, the hiring manager, the facility manager, has been very open-minded when it comes to recruiting people outside of warehousing and distribution. And we have hired some successful candidates that have come out of related roles. Maybe they've worked in a retail store, leading teams of people. They've worked and some of them worked in manufacturing capacities. There's a lot of poultry plants in the area. We've hired a couple of folks out of the poultry plants that have tired of working with chicken processing, and they're great at leading people, and they facilitated a move right into that type of environment. So that's a perfect example of moving from one industry to another, and that was really just leveraging their people leadership skills. Strategy, strategic planning, coming up with a vision, coming up with a framework, and so forth. So being able to showcase transferable skills that could be attractive to a supply chain employer is really what you're going to want to focus on. And we're going to do that through our resume. We're going to do that through our LinkedIn profile as well as our cover letter. And again, on a side note, I'm not going to have time to go into too much detail here, but we have done a past webinar on how to optimize your supply chain resume and LinkedIn profile. If you're not sure that you have a solid, easy to scan resume, I would strongly encourage you to go back and review that material. But you want to definitely have a professional headline. The objective statement is kind of, out the door. It's a little bit old school, and just so have that power branding statement. I'll show you an example in just a minute. Being able to articulate your summary and showcase those transferable skills is very important. Avoid long stacks of paragraphs and try to use bulletized formats. It just makes it easier to scan. And then, showcasing, your functional technical leadership as well as your soft skills. You want to put that into that summary up top. And then the position that you're applying to, you want to make sure you're showcasing the most relevant and significant skills and experience and accomplishments. So that might mean you have more than one resume, but be sure you tailor your resume, especially in a situation where you're trying to move into a different industry or move into a different area of supply chain, or just moving into supply chain in general. You've got to lay out what's the most relevant, what's the most significant, and try to de-emphasize anything that's not relevant to your target job. And again, showcase, hopefully by now you figured out what kind of training you need, certifications and things like that. You want to make sure you showcase any relevant certifications up top as well. So this is just kind of a scaled my resume down to just a one page just for illustration purposes, but making it easy to scan, the formatting is extremely important. And so I've got, instead of an objective statement, I've got, kind of what is it that I do, executive within the talent acquisition space, supply chain search, and so forth. There's the skill summary right there: talent acquisition, retained search, sourcing strategy, and so forth. You'll note that I've put in the kind of the synopsis of what my role is here at SCM Talent Group, and I'm using bold, I'm using format to make it really easy to scan. Now you probably can't see the small font here, but quantifying your accomplishments is very important. There's the list of associations that I belong to there at the bottom with the role I serve with APICS right now as career coach, education, and so forth. So use bolding, use formatting, use it to your advantage so you've got a nice, clean, easy to scan resume that avoids long stacks of paragraphs that really makes it difficult to scan. So once you've got your resume updated, I would also make sure you've got a strong LinkedIn profile. And we haven't talked about keywords, but understanding what are the popular keywords within supply chain. I know APICS has a online dictionary. Obviously, Google, you can research terms, but you want to understand what are the most popular terms that companies use to describe certain supply chain lingo, and you want to make sure you're embedding and integrating those keywords into your resume, into your LinkedIn profile. Us recruiters are out there searching on LinkedIn. We're using Google. We're using job boards at times to identify candidates, and it's very imperative that you have the right keywords integrated in the right places in your resume. Again, there's more detail on the past webinar. So moving on, networking really is paramount. I was talking to a friend that just got laid off. I know Coke's going through some layoffs, and helped him get in there, and he just took a package. And so he was telling me, my job search strategy entails I've applied to 12 positions so far, and I'm sitting back waiting for calls. And I said, well, that's not going to get you very far. You really need to go out and try to go in the back door and identify hiring managers of those companies, reach out proactively, make those relationships, and so forth. So connect with professionals that are already employed in your target area, discover those types of career paths that they took to get where they're at today. A great place to start is with your alumni. With LinkedIn, it's very, very easy to identify people that went to the same alma mater, and then you can reach right out and say, hey, I went to the same school. I'd love to work in supply chain. I see you're in supply chain. I'd love to connect. and then try to schedule, time to see if that person can give you some advice or maybe unlock some doors or refer you to some positions. Again, supply chain associations, especially at the chapter level, fantastic place to go out and meet supply chain professionals. You want to basically hang out where they have. These are some techniques for doing that. Other avenues to explore opportunities outside of supply chain associations. You can use Meetup, LinkedIn groups. I know there's supply chain related groups that kind of helps facilitate meetings or at least exchanging of ideas and facilitating networking. So again, we've got another white paper we've done on Master the Art of Networking, so you can check that out for more details on networking. But going back to the number one tactic that people are using today to land opportunities is truly to go through the back door. Use those job advertisements as a means, the job boards, to give you leads, to give you ideas for new companies to pursue, and then get on LinkedIn and try to figure out who's the hiring manager. This is in a plant. I'm looking to work in that plant. I've been targeting it for a long time. Well, who's the plant manager? LinkedIn makes that pretty easy to identify who that person is. Connect with recruiters that might support that department or that facility. There's always going to be an HR partner that supports that facility as well. So don't just think of who's the hiring manager. Think of other people that might help you get that foot in a door. You want to use some tools. Or if you Google, email address or something like that, you can easily identify email addresses. And here's a couple of tools here. Rapportive. There's a Chrome extension called Ninja Outreach. These are great ways for you to identify email addresses, and again, gives you another means of reaching out and contacting. The good old-fashioned phone. Very, very few people use it to reach out. Even to me, it's kind of, I get a lot of emails, a lot of LinkedIn messages, but I tell you, the ones that, if you really want to separate yourself from other candidates vying for the same positions, maybe upgrade your aggressiveness a tick or two and reach out through phone. You'd be surprised at how at the results that you can generate through reaching out and networking through the phone versus through email. Get towards the end here, then we'll move to Q&A. But when you look at your job search, and again, we've got another webinar on top strategies for launching a successful job search campaign. There's a lot of details there. You've got to manage it like a project, though. You can't just get out there. Oh, there's a posting. Ooh, you're not going to have any strategy, and you're not going to set yourself up for success if you don't have a framework, a goal that consists of goals and action steps that you need to be doing on a daily, weekly, monthly basis. You need to have a target list of companies that you're targeting. You need to identify networking contacts every single day that you can reach out to. You need to keep track of everything, organize it. Which jobs have I applied to? You don't want to lose track of that. The worst thing that can happen, an employee calls you, hey, you applied to this position. What company is this? What job is this? That's going to be frowned upon. Keep track of your interviews, your offers, all of the different websites and apps that you're using for your job search as well. Manage it like a project, and that's the most efficient way to gain a new position. And you definitely need to do these things when you're trying to move into a different area of supply chain or into supply chain management from outside. A couple of slides on transitioning from the military. Great place to get started is to simply network with folks that have already transitioned out of the military and into supply chain positions. And LinkedIn, again, makes that very easy to do. It helps you, the biggest hurdle is really just understanding the careers in supply chain, and especially the lingo. So those are individuals, by doing networking, they can help you understand and accelerate that transition. There's a lot of recruiters that recruit in supply chain that focus on military candidates. So research those individuals on LinkedIn. Use Google to find those types of firms. I know Lucas Group, they have a division that places military candidates, and oftentimes those roles exist within supply chain. If you're having trouble putting your resume together, and that can be very difficult when you're not familiar with all the terminology and lingo in supply chain, it would be worth the investment to hire a professional resume writer. I have a great guy that we use, refer people to him almost on a daily basis. So if you would like a good referral, feel free to reach out to me. But that resume, if you can get it into the right format with the right keywords and so forth, and showcase your transferable skills, that can open up a lot of doors, and it can be a very wise investment. Again, same tactics as any job seeker you want to attend. Hang out where supply chain people hang out. Hang out at the association events. Read plenty of books. We just purchased a copy of Supply Chain Management for Dummies by Daniel Stanton for every member of our staff, just to give a means of coming up to speed quickly with supply chain management. And then YouTube has enormous resources. So with that being said, we're done, and we'll move to Q&A. But before we do that, I want to turn it back over to Dana. There are some new features and benefits that APICS has launched and improved upon, and I'll let her talk to you about those, and then we'll move to Q&A.
Thanks, Rodney. What a great presentation. Before we jump into the questions, I want to make sure you're all aware of the other career-related resources we have available to you as an APICS member. Members can access job postings 4 days before non-members. When employers look in their resume bank, APICS members will be highlighted with our logo to show that you are a dedicated supply chain professional. Members will also be able to log in through LinkedIn to pull over existing information. Another new feature is the availability to see any LinkedIn connections you may have within a company whose job posting you are viewing. Lastly, you can also sign up for job alerts that can be sent daily or weekly to you, and it never hurts to upload your resume to keep your options open. And here at APICS, we also strongly believe in our mentor-mentee relationships. So we've just launched our new improved Mentor Center, and we've moved this into our supply chain channel. So go to the supply chain channel and sign up to be a mentee or give back as a mentor, and you can certainly always benefit from doing either mentee or mentor. These are just two of the many great APICS member benefits that we have to offer you. To find the job board or supply chain channel, visit apics.org and click on APICS for Individuals, where you will find links for both. And if you're currently not a member, we do encourage you to join today. So as far as questions, let's see here. We have a student that is approaching graduation, and she is interested in a company that requires SAP knowledge. Do you think it's worth the cost and effort to take some classes that take some classes in SAP that will help me stand out to the employer? And is there anything else I can do?
Yeah, that's a great question. As we talked about earlier, supply chain systems, it's becoming more and more important to learn those systems. I know a lot of universities are partnering with the technology companies, getting those a special license to use the software in a classroom setting to run things like supply chain models and play around with SAP and other types of systems. So I think it's I would say, SAP is probably, the most common ERP system. Oracle and JDA are right up there too. And there's a whole boatload of related systems. A lot of these systems do the same thing. They just have different, different nuances and user interfaces. So, it's pretty easy if you get out on LinkedIn and just run a search on SAP into keywords. You will find a lot of companies. You can find the companies that use that system, and that makes it pretty easy to target. But I would say it's worthwhile. I mean, if you're in school right now, seek out courses that relate to SAP. It certainly can give you, an advantage, because we oftentimes are asked, by our hiring managers and clients, for candidates that have experience in a certain ERP system. And typically on top of that, they're looking for other systems too. So anything you can do to help educate yourself and get some real life training on those systems can be very, very beneficial as you start launching your career in supply chain.
Great, thanks. Here's another question. I'm looking to transition into logistics from inventory management. How should I change my job search approach after I earn my CLTD?
Yeah, so as we talked about, I think it's important that you showcase that new certification at the very, very top of your resume. I would also incorporate that into any kind of, we can call it a cover letter, but any kind of outbound communication that you have to potential employers, recruiters, hiring managers, and so forth. Having a pre-established templates, and we didn't talk about this, but this can help really accelerate your job search when when you're reaching out to a lot of people, because a lot of times it's all about just is catching the right person at the right time. But you definitely want to, have a message that clearly communicates, hey, I have been in this area of supply chain. I want to work from inventory management to logistics. And here's what I've done to kind of help prepare myself for this type of move, and then have a few bullet points that contains, obviously, I went out and got my CLTD certification, and list out a few bullet points that of some of the key information that you learned. And then on top of that, any other related experience, whether it be a project you've served on, you definitely want to highlight into those messaging or communications that you have with potential employers. That's how you get their attention. So I would definitely just keep that at the top of your communications, and keep it short and sweet. Though you don't want to write a book about what you've learned. You want to try to keep it in 5 to 10 sentences, because people have very short-term, not short-term memories, but you're dealing with people very busy, so you want to keep that communication very clear and concise.
Great. How long should you wait to contact via LinkedIn, phone, etc., a hiring manager after applying for a job?
I would not wait long at all. What my tactic would be is apply to the job first. Step 2 is to get out there and try to identify who might be the hiring manager, who might be the person leading the department, facility, and then again, who's the recruiter supporting supply chain, who's the HR person that might be tied to this area that you're targeting. I would say from there, send out. It doesn't have to, send out a quick message. Again, keep it short and sweet. Hi, I just wanted to make a connection with you, Mr. Hiring Manager. I recently applied to this position. Here's the title. Here's the job number. Put in the basic details. And then look at the job description and try to ascertain what are the top things they're looking for in this role. Then look at your background and determine what do I have in my background, skills, experience, accomplishments that align. And then put that in. Again, you can do that in a cover letter. You can also do it in an in-mail message. And again, keep it short and sweet. And here's what you're looking for. Here's how I align. And then have a call to action. Always think about, what do I want to get out of this message? Perhaps it's like, could you mind spending a few minutes on the phone? I'd love to just learn more about the opportunity. Or if you're not the right person, could you please provide me of someone that I can reach out to learn more about the opportunity? So that's how I would do it. And I don't think there's any timetable. I would immediately follow up, and that way you've hit them with the front door, and then you've gone straight to the back door, and you've done those both at the same time. That can significantly increase your odds of at least getting some kind of positive traction out of that job application.
Great. I'm going to sneak in one last question, Rodney. This one's a little bit weighted. How is the job market and supply chain right now?
Well, I think it's the best that it's ever been right now. I think if you have selected supply chain, congratulations. You're in a great spot. The diversity of careers is it seems to get more diverse. If you're coming out of college, you're probably going to have a lot of different opportunities. The hard part, obviously, is just, okay, you need experience to qualify for this job. Well, I don't have any experience. So that just highlights the importance of getting internships, obviously. But I would say across every sector, we're the busiest we've ever been in my time of recruiting in supply chain. I think, the economy continues to roll. Unemployment is very low. So all of those economic signs are there. So it seems to be doing good across the board. There's just certain industries that are impacted that that are having some struggles. There's certain pockets of retail, thanks to e-commerce, that they didn't quite do a good job of keeping up with the innovations there, and are getting left behind, and that's starting to impact their profitability and their financials and so forth. But I would say overall, whether you explore a career with manufacturing seems to be coming back as well, and that's creating a lot of opportunities in supply chain. So I think it's a fantastic time to be in supply chain, and I really don't think you can go wrong with choosing a career in any of these areas. There seems to, everybody seems to be hiring across the board. I will say some of the hottest areas that we're seeing today in terms of, let's just call it, highest demand is really in sales and operations planning, integrated business planning, demand planning and forecasting. That's a very hot area. And then I would say anything to do with supply chain, digitalization, and putting in new systems, upgrading systems, e-commerce. It's all over the board. But those are hot areas that we're seeing a high demand in for talent. And on top of that, logistics has always been a great area, but with e-commerce really taken off, omni-channel really taken off, Amazon and a lot of their competitors are opening up facilities all over the place. I know you hear about real estate being an issue in supply chain. People can't find enough space to open up new facilities. So a lot of different buildings, are coming back to life, and that we can really thank Amazon and a lot of folks that are following, for those types of opportunities. So careers in distribution, logistics are on fire right now as well. And there's just not enough labor to go around. A lot of companies are challenged and experiencing a lot of pain and difficulty because they can't find enough people for their warehouses and their fulfillment centers. So again, it seems to be pretty hot across the board.
Great. Thank you, Rodney. We are out of time for today, so we'd like to formally thank our speaker, Rodney Apple, for his time today and all of our attendees for participating. We hope that you found this webinar to be beneficial. Please be sure to keep an eye out for future webinars and on the online events page of the APICS site. This concludes today's webinar. Have a great day.